Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that today is World Art Day, a time to celebrate creativity, expression, and the impact art has on everyday lives. Whether you're an artist, someone who enjoys art, or just curious, it reminds how art brings people together, sparks new ideas, and inspires change. I'm Sanvi Arabelli, 11th grade IBDB student passionate about visual arts, and I'll be your moderator for this panel. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the platform behind this event, the Art Journal Foundation. Art Journal Foundation is a creative initiative by Elevating Art Private Limited that supports the process, practice, and education in arts and culture across the globe. It's designed to serve as a resource and support system for students, teachers, and art enthusiasts. Art Journal Foundation is dedicated to fostering creativity, critical inquiry, and experimentation, encouraging artistic practices that challenge dominant narratives and push boundaries. At its core, its belief is that arts is not just important, but essential for both personal growth and building a more equitable and just world. With that, let's hear from our panelists. I invite each of you to introduce yourselves to the audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sahil Sonalkar. I am 23. I'm an incoming Masters of Foreign Service student at Georgetown University. Before this, I interned with the G20, and I did my bachelor's in philosophy, politics, and economics from King's College London. Also at university, fun fact, I used to be a Muay Thai fighter. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
Hi everyone, it's such a joy to be here. I'm Ananya, a final year student at UAL studying film and television. Over the last few years, I've had the privilege to explore different parts of storytelling, from being a TEDx speaker to running my own podcast now called Daily Dose of A, which is all about helping young people break free from conventional paths and pursue their dreams. I've also been drawing and painting since I was a little girl. Honestly, before I even knew how to talk, art became my language. And somewhere along the way, I turned that love into something bigger. I now also run a small business called The Innovatory, where I turn my illustrations into products and donate 20% to NGOs. So, yeah, I've been part of multiple creative projects, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on this debate that's kind of taking over the creative space now.
Hi, I'm Isha, and I'm currently an IBDP Year 1 student. My HLs are psychology, visual arts, and English, and I'm very interested in storytelling, art, and in philosophy. I've been a TEDx speaker, and I'm currently working on writing a novel. And I also deeply enjoy reading, and I enjoy traveling a lot. And I'm really excited to be here today and share my thoughts with all of you.
I'm sure most of us, if not all, are familiar with the Studio Ghibli trend that recently took over the internet. The Studio Ghibli trend went viral online with like people transforming everyday scenes, photos, and even cityscapes into images that mimic the dreamy, hand-painted style of Studio Ghibli. In today's discussion, we'll be diving into how trends like these influence the art community, shape creative expression, or what other considerations that come into play when art mixes with AI and emerging technologies. And with that, I'll pass it over to our panelists to get started. If any of you would like to start off with your statements.
Yeah, I'll go first. Um, Hello, as the least arty person on this panel, um, let me get started with my perspective. Um, I've worked at the intersection of policy, technology, and creativity, and I see the Ghibli aesthetic debate as part of a much wider conversation about authorship, fair use, and artistic integrity. Um, I think there's a fine line between homage and exploitation, um, and I think it's necessary to apply the fair use doctrine. By that I mean, in a personal, when you use art personally, when just to express yourself, uh, I think that's okay. I think, but once you have a profit motive or used without attribution or respect, that's where the conversation, or that's where the meat of the conversation lies. Um, I think Studio Ghibli must have the legal or moral tools to protect themselves and their work from commercial misuse and distortion. And with AI-generated content becoming more prevalent, I think there's a need for clear, enforceable frameworks, especially in intellectual property law. And I think there's a conversation that needs to be had, because today we're operating in a gray area, and I think we need to clear things out on that. Thanks.
I think my perspective comes from someone who's in between. I completely agree with Sahil, who's saying that it should only be used for personal things and not in a business sense, and something that you can use to monetize. But then there's also another perspective of art is more than just the final product, it's about the emotion behind it. And I think there's a lot behind the creation of the art that AI can't replicate. Just because it can get the final product, it does not have a thought process behind it. You can just type in a prompt and get a final image, but that is not. So I think my perspective comes somewhere in between, saying that just because it can be creative doesn't mean it should. And I think AI is a great tool and a really helpful tool, but should be used in the right ways. But how do we monitor that it's used in the right ways is the discussion.
So thank you for those perspectives, Sahil and Ananya. And I'd like to say that I believe that the age of mass consumption, as artists and consumers have abdicated our responsibility is the truth of things and to our vision and our emotion. To be an artist is to show the world as it is, not to want to become popular or liked. So when we take images generated by an AI model based on the engagement driven biases within those models and the information in its databases to be art, we must rethink the value of what we are consuming. It is important to understand that aesthetics alone cannot make something beautiful. So, a lot of passive consumers who engage with art only at a visual or at a surface level might find this kind of art valuable. But although creating images that imitate the and the magic, the overall beauty provides a small window and kind of crack in the where we can find ourselves within that fantasy. So we need to ask, how have we been consuming art? Have we been consuming it as a beautiful image or as something that is a product of lived experience in human labor?
Those were like great opinions. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you view the Studio Ghibli aesthetic and how popular it's become? Do you think it's a form of artistic appreciation, or could it be taken more of a negative aspect?
I'll go first. Uh, I think we have to look at multiple aspects. Firstly, um, look at how you use it. I I opened my Instagram the other day. I saw a couple of my friends use it on one of our old photos, and it was nice. It looked cute, and uh, I believe it was made with the intent of here's me and my friend, and since we look really awkward in our teenagers, we look slightly better through this aesthetic. And I guess to that extent, as long as the motive is clear, that it's not made for profit, it's not made for defamation, it's not made for propaganda, I think to that extent, it it should be permissible to use Studio Ghibli art. Uh, Primarily because it's really, really difficult today to regulate that kind of art. Um, AI in IPR and AI in art, in rather AI in any sort of human endeavor is really new to us. I believe, um, even I think AI governance even is in its infancy. So it's really difficult to have these clear boundaries, especially since today anyone can come and start imitating things. So I believe let's let's have I think it should be permissible, but let's not call that imitation art. I think it's just a way of self-expression through by using another person's creative style. I would think of it much more like a filter when used in that regard. However, when you look at it in, when it's used by political parties, or when it's used by propaganda, or for propaganda, for example, the White House used it. There's the Congress, BJP, everyone's been using it, and I think that's where there's a distortion, because again, originally Studio Ghibli never really looked into I think they've never really looked into political messaging that deeply, or rather, they've never supported a particular political ideology. So I think that's I personally believe that should not be allowed, but and the studio should have the power to pursue legal recourse against them. Uh, but when it's used sort of playfully just to show your friends, I think there is, uh, it, again, let's not call it art, but I believe it's okay. Hope that makes sense.
I think my perspective would be from, if you've ever watched like a Studio Ghibli film, you know what I mean when I say that it's more than just an animation. It's an emotion. It's also the quiet moments that say everything. And I think as a filmmaker, there are multiple components that make up that world of Studio Ghibli. It's the sounds that they use, the way that they portray the characters, the dialogues, but also the silence. And I think that's what makes the world so fascinating. It's kind of imperfect, and I think, but also very peaceful, which is what makes it really magical. But we're now in a space that AI can replicate that magic. You can type in a prompt into a generator and get an image that looks eerily similar. It's fascinating, no doubt, as someone who's super curious about tech. I think it's so exciting to see that the speed and accessibility of all the endless possibilities of what we can do. But I also find it deeply unsettling just because it is another artist's work. And I think there's a line and we're dangerously close to crossing it. I believe that AI can be a powerful tool and is a powerful tool to support artists, to support filmmakers with different kind of tasks, whether it be I use it for storyboarding, I use it to assist with my subtitling work and generate rough cuts and stuff. So I think it's a great space to use it as a tool. But I think when it starts replacing the expression in itself, the heart, the process, that's where it becomes a threat. I understand why people are drawn to the Ghibli trend and creating their pictures with it. It feels comforting, it feels nostalgic, and I think everyone wants to place themselves in that little world, and it just looks cute. It's something that people use to bond and send to their family. Like, look at how we look on this picture, and I think it's a very cute thing to bring people together. But at the same time, I think Ghibli wasn't meant to be a trend or a filter. It was meant to make you feel something, and maybe that's what we're losing in the process.
So I completely agree with the points that you've brought to the table. And to add on to that, I'd like to say that I've noticed a kind of pattern and a beauty in East Asian culture and in East Asian philosophy, which is translated into their art. So the art that I've noticed has been produced by Ghibli, also kind of translates this narrative of tranquility, of silence, of minimalism, and of simplicity comes through a kind of personal association which AI cannot replicate, which is why I think it merely just flattens and condenses that kind of beauty to create a still image. Um, I feel like Ghibli in itself was, as Ananya said, meant to evoke emotion. It was meant to make you dwell and to observe and to feel what it intended to what message it intended to put across. But we've been conditioned against that in the media that we consume today. We've been conditioned to consume short form content, and now it's been condensed into a kind of image that you can just easily scroll past. It's a kind of filter, a kind of vibe. And so I think over there, um, I feel like nothing fuels consumption like immediacy. But when we turn art into immediacy, it just becomes aestheticism without a soul. And that's why reproducing is not equal to appreciating, because where AI is reproducing art and making it available to the masses, it's stripping the it's stripping the essence and the soul of the art, which is actually present in the human labor and in the process of generating or creating it.
Yeah, the points you guys brought up were like very interesting because me coming from a background of being a Studio Ghibli fan, Miyazaki's work always explores nature, tranquility, and human life and emotion, which I think are all points that you guys brought up. And it does make sense that it's become like a filter almost, and there is a line between good and bad use of it. So moving forward, how do you think this tool or AI could develop in a way it could either be beneficial to the art community or more a threat?
So I'd like to start off by saying, by giving an example. So, for example, now I've been noticing a lot of paint by number artworks. So I recently saw this one paint by number piece of Van Gogh, and what I noticed is that it kind of strips the beauty of the art itself, of the meaning of Van Gogh. So, and his art style. So post-impressionism was meant to be deeply evocative and expressive. Each brushstroke had a specific intent, had a specific expression. But when we take that into a paint by number, it just becomes a reproduction of the style. You just copy it. And so, if you want to actually appreciate it, I think you should understand the style and the significance of it and lean into that instead of just copying. So, this is where I think that AI creating art is not actually permissible or very beneficial for artists. Um, However, borrowing a style is appreciating. A human creating a style inspired by that is appreciating. So I think when we understand that eroding art is different from appreciating it, that's where we can become more sensitive and understand how to ethically appreciate.
I think if any of you have created art, you'll know that it's not just what you see at the end. It is a process, and I think that's what we've spoken about. But it comes from a lot of emotion, and that is all based on the human behind it. And I think that's something that AI can't generate just as yet. Maybe in the future, if technology goes to that extent. But right now, there is a clear difference in my head between AI art and original art. However, because we're getting so close to closing the gap between AI art and human art, I think it's important to talk about this topic. So let me give you a personal example. At Innovatory, I hand draw every illustration, and there's a thought behind everything that I'm doing, and what kind of colors I'm choosing, what kind of elements I'm choosing to put into the artwork. But now imagine someone creating it, something very similar with just a one-line AI prompt, with no story, no effort, or no connection. What does that mean for me as a creator and the value of my work? And I think that's where the distinction lies. When someone uses the Ghibli style casually, maybe just to create a wallpaper for their phone or something for fun, I think that can be considered admiration and a desire to feel part of that world. But when a brand or a creator starts to make profit from that aesthetic, when they use it to sell prints or market products, or build a visual identity through that, without truly engaging with any of that and the content, the story behind it, it becomes mere exploitation. And I think that's using someone else's emotional labor as a shortcut. And the more we normalize it, I think the more you push artists to the sidelines, but not because they're not talented or not. It's because their talent no longer seems necessary in a system where a visual look is enough. So I think that's not fair innovation. So I worry that just because we're forgetting that creation isn't just about access, it's also about intent. And I think AI doesn't care what it makes, but artists really do. So I think that's where the line is.
I think these are great points to bring up, and also just a general statement to anyone in the audience. If you guys do have any points, questions, or anything, feel free to use the chat box. We'll all be reading it. And another, like, a way to continue this conversation, again, using AI art, it crosses the line of like ethics and more legal considerations. So do you guys have any like points or any like thought process on how like legally we can help integrate AI in more of a helpful manner to artists rather than a harmful way?
So I think this is a very interesting perspective because we've explored how AI diminishes the value of art. But so I think one important factor that we need to understand is that AI does not essentially, or digital online platforms for that matter, they do not essentially democratize art. They just shift the power from one hand to another. So for centuries, we've seen traditional gatekeepers of art and institutions of knowledge um, determining what art gains visibility. For example, we had art critics, we had galleries, etc. And they decided what kind of art gained how much value, what kind of art was available to the masses. But I've seen a lot of artists switch to digital platforms because it's a very easy way to get access to a broader audience. And in this way, in doing this, I've seen that the power has shifted from these traditional gatekeepers to algorithms and to the metrics online, and now they determine the visibility of art. And what this does is that it just prioritizes engagement, so it creates a kind of echo chamber. So the kind of art that, or the kind of content that you've already been engaging with, that is what you are repeatedly shown, and it's what you're repeatedly exposed to. in this kind of engagement and traction prioritizing algorithm. So this is why I think that in an age of AI generated art, human art will become more valuable because all AI can do is replicate. And so if it keeps replicating and you're being shown the same thing again and again, something that is new, something that is authentic, something that has truth and emotion to it will become more valuable and I think will gain more traction. So I think over here, originality becomes more important.
Yeah, just to add in, I just to add on to that, I believe just from a governance perspective, AI in art is a nightmare. There are solutions. For example, a lot of places you say made with AI, and I think you can have those sorts of tags that can help you identify what's made with AI, what's not. And I think there need to be broader frameworks like that worldwide, because what AI has done is it's really made it easy to just copy someone else's style. And today, what I think it does is it blurs the line between appropriation and appreciation. And I think in order to get that distinction right and safeguard artists, you need to have a solution that says that it is something like made by AI, or we need to create stronger uh, sort of mechanisms or in technology to track the use of AI, because I think it's incredibly important to protect artists and human-made art, because today, I mean, today it's a problem. Tomorrow it could be a nightmare, and we really need to have these sort of safeguards.
Yeah, in chat, Sneha made a point saying that in terms of how AI repeats what content is fed, that it's no novel content AI can come up with, which is where the human role comes in. So do you guys have anything to add on to this, or?
Yeah, so I'd also like to say that, as I mentioned before, um, so I've scrolled a lot. The AI trend, the AI generated Ghibli art trend, like many of us here, has also infiltrated my For You page. And I've seen many perspectives. I've seen artists talking about it. I've seen tech involved people talking about it. And what I've realized is, as I mentioned before, that most of the people who feel very triggered about AI generated art are the people who assume that it is mere aesthetic. But aesthetic alone is not enough to make something beautiful. And so I think if we are actually so unsettled by AI art, it reveals a deeper truth about how we as consumers view art. Because art, and I think this should be a universal truth that art is a lot deeper than the mere surface. It's a lot deeper than what we see. It's in the process and it's in the lived experience. So we need to understand and recognize this truth in order to safeguard artists and their role.
So, again, just bringing this back to like Studio Ghibli, and AI. So, as a Studio Ghibli fan, for all my life, like I've watched his movies as I grew up. So, Studio Ghibli plays a huge personal connection to me. So, of course, with the AI, the Studio Ghibli trend becoming a big popular thing, the thought of having myself memories or photos of me and my friends drawn in a Studio Ghibli style, it brings nostalgia. It brings like a sense, like a type of happiness or and a type of like awe to it. So again, it comes down to whether the fact of the studio's opinion, Miyazaki's opinion on whether this is something that he's okay with because it is his art style. So I think we should take into consideration what Studio Ghibli or Miyazaki or themselves think of the trend.
So thank you for bringing up the concept of death of the author. And I'd like to share a personal anecdote here. So I recently gave a speech and I spent a lot of time on that speech. I spent a long come up with say that properly encapsulated what my more popular. So one type of reaction were people who told me, I'm sure you used AI. Be honest. I know you used ChatGPT while creating this. And the other kind of reaction were people who said, wow, I resonated with your thought process and I was able to connect with it on a personal level. And I really understood where you were coming from. And so I think the author can be interpreted in many different ways. There are people who come with a pessimistic mind and, and that kind of mindset where they believe in scale of digitization. I do believe when your book has authenticity and when it has that truth to it, it does shine. It does it is visible how you have um come from a very personal perspective.
I do think that art is very personal and comes from a very personal approach, but I do think there are people in this world that don't necessarily appreciate art and artists and are just focused mostly on the final product. So, for example, if you were looking for a logo for your brand, and there was an artist who's proposing, 50,000 rupees, and they'll make an art, like they'll make an original thing for you, they'll design it from scratch with a lot of thought put behind it. And then there's AI, which can generate it in a second with zero cost involved. I think a lot of people would take the second approach, especially if they haven't practiced art themselves or do not know artists themselves. So I think there's also a part of educating people about art, educating people about the importance of original artwork. And I think that's something that is very important to also be touched on.
Um, in chat, there was a good point brought up that it is disrespectful to use this type of art style generated without the artist's official consent. So if my personal opinion on it is that uh, like Studio Ghibli's work is very personal to obviously the creator, Miyazaki himself. He spent a lot of years developing his own work, and to my knowledge, like to this day, Studio Ghibli as a studio still uses a lot of hand-drawn techniques and take incredible time and effort to produce movies. So, with that, like with me is there's this video that keeps resurfacing on Instagram if you see of an interview with Miyazaki talking about an AI model. Do you guys have any insights or opinions on that?
So I'd like to say here that I've seen a lot of reels about that video, and most of the reels that I've seen are cropped and they show very particular sections, which led me to believe that Miyazaki is strongly against the use of AI to replicate his art, seeing that this was becoming very popular as a social media trend. And so I thought I this caused me to have this kind of outrage about on people who were using his art style and still generating AI images. But when I went a little deeper into this and I saw the entire video, I actually saw that the video was from a long time back. It was from 2016, and it was of Miyazaki's like the people of the Ghibli studio, showing him a very specific AI generated art model where it was a video of uh, a zombie doing grotesque movements, like moving with his head and his legs. And that caused personal offense to Miyazaki, which is why he said what he said about AI being an insult to life itself. So I don't think these comments can be generalized, which I've seen many of these comments being generalized because to all AI models, which I think also speaks to the kind of woke culture that we have on internet today. Everybody wants to gain woke points by showing that they actually care or they have a different perspective to offer. But this isn't always researched, and this kind of ignorance that also surfaces on the internet causes the kind of dissonance and reinforces it in how the creative boundaries are shaped.
I think I agree with Isha saying that like we've taken one specific part of the video, we've not understood the context of it, and we're now saying that he does not necessarily fully agree with it. I think there's a lot more to it that can be said, and that can be researched. Obviously, no matter what the trend is right now, the trend is not even coming close to replicating the Studio Ghibli like animation style or anything of that sort. And I think it's just something, it's like a filter that companies sometimes use to basically also can be used to increase popularity of that particular thing. So for example, say Studio Ghibli was only accessible to a certain kind of audience. I think now a lot more people know about it and maybe will want to watch it because now they've sort of been part of that universe in their head.
Yeah, I believe that just to add on to Ananya's point, I believe that of course there is some amount of benefit to Studio Ghibli from this trend. I mean, I don't think we can deny that. Uh, but then again, uh, the question is, was did they really want that? Like, did Miyazaki really want that? Because some people say all publicity is good publicity, but I mean, this, you don't necessarily have to agree with that because there's a purity to art, and I'm pretty sure that it's been corrupted by using it as a mere filter rather than what it is. What I think there is a way around it, but it really needs to be um, it really needs to be enforced. I think artists have to have the option to opt in whether or not their as to whether or not their art can be used on AI platforms. Because uh, I don't know how else you could do justice to the artist. Uh, and again, just the fact that we have to look at appropriation in a larger context. Um, do you like because I don't know if there's any other way that we can really minimize the use of of uh, of Ghibli art by companies. I think there has to be a top-down approach where we have studios and governments and international organizations collaborating on IPR regulation.
So to kind of like wrap up our our discussion and make sure everyone has their ideas said, I wanted to ask what are your guys' opinions when it comes to AI generation of images? It's coming to a point where, yes, it's not at a stage right now where it could properly imitate artist's work and all that, but there is a scope for it to improve. There is a chance that it can be developed to start replacing jobs. So how does this affect specifically like the animation industry or any like digital art type industry? So do you guys have any points?
Yeah, I'd like to address that as well as the question about does an AI become a tool to democratize the creation of art to people who are equally appreciative of the process, but are not capable of producing art themselves? So, firstly, I'd like to say that AI generated models have a lot of bias in them because they are conditioned and they are fed with information and data, which is different from a human brain because although humans also psychologically, from the psychological perspective, have mental frameworks like schemas and heuristics, which are essentially constructed by information, humans process information in a different way. Whereas computer models process information in a completely different way. So, for example, computer-based models are prioritizing engagement. They are prioritizing traction. And so over here, this creates the bias where art is not generated with pure intent, with the intent of expression, but it is generated with the intent of being liked or being popular. And I think this completely erodes the point of art. Like I mentioned before, I think the point of art is truth. But when art is generated or created with the intent of being liked, it is from the vision of the viewer, not from the vision of the artist. And talking about the democratization of art, as I mentioned before, this kind of bias within the AI models, where the same kind of art is repeatedly shown, um, because of the prioritization of engagement, it leads to the creation of an echo chamber. So I don't think that AI actually or digital platforms completely democratize art. I think the power is just shifted from the hands of traditional gatekeepers to the hands of tech companies for their own personal profit. Um, yeah.
I do think that AI cannot replicate humans just as yet, but with the way technology is progressing, we do not know when the point will come where there is some similarity between the two. And I think recently came across something that stuck with me. It was malls setting up AI photo booths. So you can basically create Ghibli style caricatures of people. And I think at first it's cool, but also if you just take a step back and see what does it mean for real artists, the ones who've actually spent a lot of time perfecting their craft of making caricatures and who are now having to compete with an instant low cost alternative. So I think it's not just about aesthetics anymore, but also livelihoods. And I think that's where the conversation needs to begin. I've met many creators who are generally excited about AI. They see it as a tool, a way to automate the boring bits. And they're not scared of integrating it in a way to enhance their creativity. And I think that's the version of AI I believe in and I support, the one that can help but not replace. And I think that's where the line has to be drawn. Because when AI is replicating someone else's artistic soul, especially styles as rich as Studio Ghibli, we need to ask the question, where does admiration end and appropriation begin? So I think creativity should be for everyone, and I think it's something that everyone should appreciate. But I don't think it should be at the cost of creators itself, the ones who have spent many years actually learning these things and maybe putting it into the algorithm that ChatGPT uses. So I think it can open doors, but I think people need to be intentional with the way they use it, and recognize that it can be in the background, it can be something to help us, but I think art should stay with the heart, with the humans, and stay with, yeah, because we want artists to have their own place and to be respected for what they're good at.
Yeah, just to add on to Ishan and Anya's points, I think I don't know if AI will replace art. I don't think it can replace human-made art, at least not in its present form. And I believe there have to be ethical and moral and legal guardrails to prevent it from doing so in the future. But I believe it will still fundamentally alter the landscape of the art world. I think there's we will have a difference. It'll reshape how art is made, who makes it, and what we value as consumers and customers. So we really have to look into these things. I think the future of art will have to, it'll be built on coexisting with AI and human artists, and I think it'll be up to us to find the art in a world of infinite visual noise. So I think there's two aspects to it. Number one, we create those ethical guidelines, and we create them at a governance, policy, legal level. And on the other hand, we have to reach out to people and reach out to consumers of art and even potential consumers of arts, kids, and really make them understand that, hey, it's not just what you see, it's about what you do with art. And I think experiential learning and just getting that hands-on experience of creating a piece of art, that could be visual, that could be a piece of music, that could be anything. But I think kids need to get that, because then you create a batch of educated, at least slightly more educated than what we have today, consumers of art, and hopefully creators of art. So yeah, I believe there's a revolution coming, but we can prepare a lot better than we are right now.
I definitely agree with the point that Sahil made about educating consumers, because I think the value of art is something that maybe someone as an artist understands, and you can understand that human art is different than AI art. But I think, like as the years pass and maybe AI is able to replicate more and better versions of art, I think that the appreciation will only come from consumers who have actually had exposure to different forms of art, who have an appreciation and understanding ingrained in them. So I think it's very essential.
So I'd just like to address some of the points in the chat box. Um, so I think Stephanus asked, do we need to be cautious, and why is Ghibli's artwork chosen for this trend? So I think the personal ethos of Studio Ghibli provides a lot of emphasis on human created art, on hand drawn art, and on a deep connection with nature and natural elements, which provides it with its beauty. If you see the animation and if you see the movies, there's this very soft and very emotional way of animating, the way that the water is animated, or the way that leaves are animated, um and in this way because of their emphasis on nature and on human, on connection, it creates a kind of paradox because their artwork is being replicated by technology, where even though they have this kind of emphasis on natural elements.
Yeah, just to come to Stephanos's question, I really think, yeah, the second part, just to come to the second part of the question, I think it's really important that we think about privacy and data privacy, because and digital security in that, for that matter, because everyone thinks creating these AI images is free, but it's not free. It comes at the cost of your data and your personal, and that's your personal property. So you're giving that away, in exchange for creating a sort of a Ghibli, a personalized version of Ghibli art. And again, I think that goes back to educating consumers, educating customers, and I think we lack data literacy in that matter, and especially in a country like India, where you've got about 800 million uh, cell phone and internet users. A lot of us are willing to give our data away because it's free. But no, there's a price attached to it. And I think people really need to understand that.
I completely agree with the points that Sahil has brought to the table. And I'd like to add to this point by saying that how the Ghibli trend actually started and why people have started favoring Ghibli is because the CEO of ChatGPT, which is Sam Altman, he essentially changed his profile picture to an AI generated Ghibli image, which launched this entire trend, and he's credited with doing it. So I think we're kind of provoked to question over here about why he did so, and maybe I've seen some must about how ChatGPT and their company might have done this to gain access to more visuals to develop their model. So in that case, it would become a big ethical breach.
Yeah, these points are very like important to consider because this also provides like more goes into the legal aspect of things because this is your data being taken away from you, your personal data. It could be used in a lot of different type of practices businesses could use it for. I'd also like to just mention generally to our audience that from this point on, we will be solely taking questions. So if you guys have questions, please put them in chat. We'll address them one by one. Yes, the audience, you can also unmute and speak yourselves if you choose to, if you don't want to use the chat box.
To also address the point where we brought up the massive amounts of water that it takes to cool down the CPUs, the CEO of ChatGPT actually released a statement where where he said that their CPUs were like literally melting down because of the large amounts of requests that were coming in, not only for AI generated images, but in general. And that's why they had to put greater bans on the free users of ChatGPT. And I think this question of how internet impacts our environment in terms of electricity, in terms of water consumption, etc. It's not just a question on AI, but our consumption of media in general. Actually, even video streaming or anything like that, it does take up a lot of water, a lot of electricity as well.
In chat, there was a really good question that came up. They're asking whether, like, similarly how artists take inspiration from other artists or create something in a similar style, why does AI tools, like the use of AI tools become a problem if it's doing essentially something similar?
I think there's a question, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's the question of the fact that there's still something personal, that the artist still has their own interpretation of what, for example, Ghibli's art looks like, because there might be something that's extra personal to them. There might be something that they cherish, they admire, they want to replicate in their work. And I don't think AI has that, because what essentially AI is, what it does is it just takes all of this information and just creates a sort of average of what a Studio Ghibli artwork should look like. So I think, again, it just takes out the human, creative, personal aspect of it, and I think that's a little unfair.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sahil. I think the reason that there's a difference, I think if you were to take art and replicate it even as an artist, that is called plagiarism, and that is not right as well. Taking inspiration and copying or replicating are separate things, and I think that's what makes it so distinct.
Another question in chat was asked is how can we how can we stop this trend to being further used, and how can we educate people that AI steals art or someone's data? So actually, in this aspect, in my opinion, I believe that we should be talking about it more on social media, not in an aggressive manner or anything, just with the pure intent of education rather than being on a biased side, and rather than taking any type of information from similarly how the interview was taken, only short clips of it shown out of context. If you can give someone the entire information with being unbiased, I think that's one of the main ways we can, as like artists, to educate our community and other people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a trend. It will eventually fizzle out by itself. That's another point. And I don't think there's anything that all like we can do to stop it right now, but everyone can make their own effort by educating people.
And I think this also brings us back to the point of woke culture, where everybody sort of wants to contradict each other to show that they have some kind of originality without proper research, which further deepens our ignorance. So I think another thing we need to consider here is that when we are faced with so many contradictory perspectives, um, it creates this kind of cognitive dissonance where we don't know what to believe. And the truth or the knowledge that is actually important gets completely dissolved. And I think over there, we start losing track of ourselves and of our ethics, which is why I believe that even apart from just educating and spreading awareness, we need to take real initiative. And the studio themselves also have a role to play in this because um, although people have put their images and Studio Ghibli's images onto ChatGPT, and now ChatGPT owns that image as part of their database, they do rightfully belong to the studio. And so the studio themselves have to take legal measures.
Just a quick point. Again, on data governance, something that I've noticed, and I was actually working on data governance last week. No one has been able to settle down on a structure, on like a definite sort of data governance uh, b- sort of legal guidebook for data governance, because again, and especially with the advent of AI, it's really challenging to look at the nature of IPR, because again, the style of art is Studio Ghibli's, but it wasn't technically created by Studio Ghibli. It was created by ChatGPT using Studio Ghibli's style based off of your personal data. So there's a lot of different aspects that we really need to look at. And I think broader data governance structures really have to take these things into account. They have to evolve along these lines. And so far, unfortunately, nobody's been able to crack the code. There's different there's the GDPR, there's India's Data Protection Act, but I don't think any one of them have the answer yet. I think the answer will come to us on a maybe in a couple of years, but I think it'll be too late by then, because then we'll have new questions to answer.
So I completely agree with the point that what ChatGPT does is that it uses Studio Ghibli style, it's not Studio Ghibli that's creating this. And I've also noticed in the chat box that someone has mentioned the ethics of it, like whether or not it is stolen, because we do consent to it. And over here, I think we need to talk about the difference between style and culture and movement. So again, I'll take the example of Van Gogh because I'm sure that's something that everyone is very familiar with. So when we look at culture, it is postmodern art in general. It is post-impressionism in general. It is the art style um, expressed with its general characteristics. But when we look at style, it is more personal and it's rooted in personal expression. Every artist has their own distinct style. And so to replicate culture as a human again, I think is permissible to some extent, but to replicate style should not be permissible because that is personal.
With that final point, we will have to wrap it up. Our time has unfortunately ended, but thank you guys for listening. It was uh, I'm very glad we were able to talk about this type of topic and just initially what's come up and how our community is being affected.
Yeah, I think it's time, and I would also like to thank the panelists and Sanvi for taking us through this, very insightful discussion today. Uh, I feel really proud of, we are seeing youngsters like you talking about it so meaningfully and with evidence that as adults, I think we should pick it up that awareness is something that is very, very important at this point of time. There's a question that came in, that is it wrong to use AI to generate art or create a form of art? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. And hence, we did not even come up with today's discussion as a debate. It is more about perspective. It is more about your knowledge and awareness about it. So let's together keep thinking about it, whatever is the best for the generation around us, and not only for one individual or one artist in picture. So let's all keep researching, talking, discussing all of these things so that people around us are more aware. Thank you so much to the panelists, Sahil, Ananya, Isha, and thank you, Sanvi, for making it more vibrant today. All the best to you, all your endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, audience, for
Nanya.
all your
Thank you,
contributions.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.